And I want to start out this week by doing like a little bridge from last week into this week. So I want to start this week with this little bridge. And that is, I kind of ended with an abrupt statement because we were out of time about how I was teaching from here. And everybody's like, yeah, duh, we know that. And I was like, but if I was not there in that camp, I was like, I'd probably be an idealist and I probably would never end up in this camp. Right? And everybody was kind of like, oh, wow. Right? Like, and the fact that I was very bold in the way I said that, I'm usually not that way. Well, I usually say, well, it could be this, we don't know. This is where kind of I'm at today. But I was a pretty hard, I would never be here. And everybody was like, whoa, wow, I can't believe Mike kind of was that firm. It was kind of the reaction I got back from you guys. Let me tell you why. And that's the bridge from last week into this week. The reason why is because there's a couple reasons. And I'll hit both of them super quick because one of them ties into this week. One of them is I believe this camp falls into the same trap that the Pharisees fell into. And that trap is an earthly kingdom. What did they want Jesus to do? They want him to drive out the Romans and go set up, recreate a throne of David physically in Jerusalem, in the temple, and rule from it. That's what they wanted from the Messiah. Maybe not Jesus himself, but if he was the Messiah, that's what they expected. Very clear in the New Testament. And Jesus is like, my kingdom is not of this world. And in fact, when we just read some of the stuff in the last couple of weeks I've been studying for the messages, it would say stuff like, show us the keys. You won't see the kingdom. You don't have eyes to see it. And you're going to say, the kingdom is not of this physically this world. You'll be looking here and you'll miss it, right? And so he never says my kingdom is not of this world right now, but one day I'm going to set up an earthly physical kingdom. No, everything in the New Testament and everything in the Gospels, especially the Gospel accounts, Jesus strictly says his kingdom is not a physical earthly kingdom.
So what's going to be in the new earth?
So I'm talking about in this creation, because that's a whole new creation. But in this creation, this world, he says it's not a physical kingdom. And the folks in this camp say that there will be a future physical earthly kingdom. And I can't find that anywhere in the New Testament, especially in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Well, as I told you, I'm pretty sure I'm in that.
And that's okay.
But that's not what I have been taught my whole life. It just comes in with the new heaven and the new earth. Yeah.
Right, because very, very few times does somebody run completely through a viewpoint. You pick up bits and pieces of it as people teach it, but you don't hit every single detail in each viewpoint. But whenever they talk about the millennial reign, they're talking about a physical earthly kingdom on earth. Jesus setting in a throne in Jerusalem with a third temple that will be rebuilt in the future. That's that view. And because of that, I feel like that's number one. I feel like that is the same trap the Pharisees fell into. We want Jesus to come and set this horrible stuff right. Back then it was the Romans. Now it's whatever people fill in the blank, whatever's wrong with the world today. Jesus comes set it right, set up a throne, reign for an earthly reign on this earth for however long. I just don't think that's ever taught. The other reason is some of the stuff we're about to get into tonight is the whole timing stuff. Is the more I've went down that rabbit hole, I just think the timing really, really, really points to the majority of all this stuff already happening and not a future, like our future prophecy. But the main one is the trap of the Pharisees. The whole idea is Jesus never came to set up an earthly kingdom. And in both of these, and all three of these, and all the historicist views, this earthly kingdom for a period of time is key and essential in that belief system. And I'm just like, I can't go along with that. And so the folks in this camp, the reason I say I could go, if this is not true, I would go there. And the reason is because the interpretations are roughly the same. It's just they're saying all these events that Revelation uncovers is just telling this overarching story of of God overcoming the evil that's around, and we win in the end every time. And the unjust and evil will not go unpunished throughout history. And it's a cycle that'll repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat over again. They don't do much disagreeing on interpretation necessarily. It's just the application. They're not hung on 70 AD. They're just saying, sure, it's talking about Nero, it's talking about Rome, but it's telling a moral story of the gospel and of Jesus overcoming. Both of these views also say that where in chapter 20 of verse in Revelation, where it says he'll reign for 1,000 years, both of these positions say that's a long period of time. That's not an earthly reign. It's him reigning from heaven. So they both deny this whole idea of a physical, like there's going to be some future physical earthly kingdom. That is why I say I have issues going here ever. These two are not, they're not identical by all means. They'll disagree, but they have more similarities in common with those things. The deal breakers I have aren't in either one of those, that the deal breakers I have with these. So that's why. So I didn't want to just say, hey, this, and I kind of felt as I went and rewatched the Bible study, I was like, oh, I was a little harsh there because I wasn't trying to be. There's just a reason why. So as we move into tonight with the part 2 of the Bible study on the intro to Revelation, part 2 of the intro, we're talking about the dating of the book of Revelations. It's been highly contested throughout history. Yeah.
Are we using the page from last week?
We can, but I kind of, it's like kind of an way I'm going to flow the conversation. But when I got into the sources, I created a whole other handout for the sources. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll be very little on that overarching hand. I only had like 4 or 5 points in that original one just to try to keep me on track as far as an outline. And then I supplemented it with in detail stuff. Okay. This one is there's one thing here's dependent. If it is beyond a shadow of a doubt, if the late date of Revelation is true, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this whole section cannot be true. These two are not dependent on the date of Revelation. It could be an early date. It could be a late date. It don't matter. Both of these views wouldn't bother. But this one, if the dating of the book of Revelation is in the 90s, this view has to be eliminated. Because it wouldn't be prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem. It would have occurred 25 years prior. Right? So that's why I say the dating is crucially important for 2 reasons. One, it eliminates a whole position if the dating is in the late date. And the other reason why is remember last week when I said in order to interpret apocalyptic writing, you have to know what it's talking about. You have to have a time frame or a subject matter in order to if I was to just give you, remember all those verses we read last week? You don't remember every single one in detail, but they all said almost the same thing. But they were talking about like 3 different events, right? And if I just would have gave you those verses without telling you the time frame or the event or the person it was talking about, you would have had no clue what it was talking about. You got to have the time frame or the event or the person somewhere given in order to then go and interpret what it's talking about, because it's so cosmic, it's so grandiose, and it's almost identical each time. Each time you see the language, even though it's different events, the language was almost verbatim, like quotes, identical quotes. So that's the other reason why dating is so important. A, it eliminates a view, and B, it's the only way to properly interpret any kind of apocalyptic writing is to know when and what it was talking about. All right. Boom. So that takes us into this week. All right. So when we try to date any book in the Bible, it's not just Revelation. Any book in the Bible. Even somebody wrote something to try to date Iliad and the Odyssey. Like anytime we go try to date any historic or ancient writing, most of them don't have a copyright and publish date on it like it does when you open up a book today. So you have to investigate like a detective. Okay? And you're never going to have an exact date on it, but you try to narrow it down within a good, solid range. And here's how you do it. Let me give you an example. I can make a statement that is 100% true and is very easy to make. Every single book or letter in the New Testament that was written by the apostles, other than John, had to have been written prior to 68 AD. Does anybody know how I made that statement? Nero killed them all, and he died in 68 AD. So if we have a record that if we have absolute positive record that Nero died in, I think it was June the 9th in 68 AD is when Nero died. I think that was the date. So if Nero died on that date, and he is the one that killed all the other apostles, other than John, but Nero killed them all. And so therefore, if he did it, then all the writings had to have happened before that. That's a baseline. So then you say, okay, is there anything in the writings? Does anybody outside of the writings, any of the church fathers from the 1st or 2nd century, mention something that might help us date it, like which emperor was reigning when they wrote it, or if there was some events going on in that town or city, and then you look it up. Like there's some pretty big events that happened in some of the early churches, like around 60 AD, there was a massive earthquake in Laodicea, which damaged the city a lot. So if anybody would ever, if Clement of Rome mentioned the earthquake in Laodicea, you say, oh, then he had to have written that after 60 AD because that's when it happened. You get where I'm going with it. We use events in history that we do know about, and we hope that the writer mentions some of them so that we can use that to date it and eliminate some dates. And most of the time, when you deduce dates for writings, it's usually a range. We'll say this year to this year, or around this time, because we don't know the specific date. So here are the two possible ranges for Revelation. One is 64 to 68 AD. Okay? 64 to 68. That is considered the early date, the early range. The other possibility is 81. Oh, so no, I'm sorry. The other possibility is
95.
After. Yes, I'd say 96-ish.
You've got 95 to 96.
Yeah, I would actually say it's more like 96-ish. It's probably later than 95, but whatever. 95, 96. Doesn't matter. Whatever. We're talking about mid 90s AD. That's the other range. Okay. The reason that those are the two ranges, 95 to 96 and 64 to 68. Okay. There's a reason why those are the two ranges. The reason is because Nero was horribly evil and a tyrant, and he had plenty of nicknames. One of his nicknames was the Beast. He used to run around dressed up with like animal skins on, acting like a beast with actual horns attached to his head. And then he would have boys tied up naked in the palace and would do things to them.
Yeah.
And not necessarily, but I'm not talking like sexual things. I'm talking like evil things, like mutilating them and stuff like that. I'm not talking about like erotic things. I'm talking about like crazy. Yeah. And one of his nicknames was the Beast. They called him the Tyrant often. He had multiple nicknames. Here's the other thing. There was an emperor named Domitian. You probably heard about him. I don't think he was as bad as Nero, but he was pretty bad. And one of his nicknames was the Tyrant. And so there are places in some of the external sources where they mention some of this happening during the reign of a tyrant or the tyrant. Well, which one was it? Right? Because they're both had those names.
What did you say the second name was?
Domitian.
Domitian.
Yeah.
See on this?
Okay.
Yeah. And if you want to know, I've got a sheet floating around, and I tried to title. I titled all of them this time, and it's titled "The Roman Kings" or something to that effect. Kings of Rome, and it lists every Roman emperor through the second century, and it lists the years that they were the emperor. Okay, so yeah, he is. Yeah, well, on exile on the island of Patmos, we can do that. But we're trying to figure out who sent him there. And so there's two candidates. One candidate is Nero, and the other candidate is Domitian. And so the problem is none of the primary sources flat out say that it was Domitian that's sitting there, or that it was Nero that's sitting there. The couple of them refer to the tyrant sitting there. Well, that could have been either. So then we got to figure out other clues, okay? And so that's what we're going to do tonight. But first question I want to ask before we start is, and it's a real question, and I'll tell you the answer real quick. It's not a biblical question. It's a research question. I hope not. Well, everything else is a build-up. But anyway, so what is the difference between a primary source and a secondary source? Okay. A primary source. Yeah, it's the original. Okay, and then so if I was a lot of people who do PhDs do primary research. They're the ones who got and do the studies. They put things together, and it's the original study. And then other people write papers analyzing it and different things, referencing back to the primary source. Okay. As far as dating a book, I don't want to look at secondary sources. We only want to look at primary, because a secondary is just repeating what the primary said, and they may repeat it wrong, right? So we only want to look at primary sources. Hope that makes sense. So there's very few primary sources. We got the book of Revelation and the other parts of the Bible, but mainly Revelation. That's internal. So I'll put Revelation here itself. Internal source. Primary source from John, from the writer's mouth, or from his pen anyway. Maybe not his mouth, but from his pen, straight from the writer's pen. External sources. We have a few. We'll do them from memory, and then we'll get into talking about them. We got a couple Clements. We got Clement of Rome. Got Clement of Alexandria. We got Irenaeus. I can't spell it. Anybody got that? Irenaeus. I can't remember. Irenaeus, whatever. That's not right. That's short. And we got
Irenaeus.
Aeus. Okay. And then the last one is Tertullian. I can't spell that either. It's on there. Who's he?
Tertu.
Tertullian. Okay. This is it. That's all we got. So we got to figure out when Revelation was written based on this alone. Now, there's several verses in Revelation, and we're going to hit them all. So break out the sheet. I got a sheet here that's labeled sources, Revelation, dating the writing. Okay, at the top of it, it lists the two possibilities. And so every question we're going to ask, does it point to either one? I'm not going to ask it over and over again, but that's what we need to ask ourselves when we try to date a book. This is what scholars do when they sit around trying to figure this out, and they publish it in if you guys have a Bible study Bible, the commentary, and you got an introduction to a book. This is exactly what they do to try to present to you what they think the result is on any book of the Bible. We're going to do that tonight. So we're going to start in Revelation chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Anybody want to read?
Revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who testifies to everything he saw. That is, the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take to heart what is written in it, because the time is near.
That's right. So the King James uses very similar phrases. I want to hit two of them. You said that it will you said soon take place. King James says, which must shortly come to pass. And every translation uses some variation of those wordings. And then the second one I want to point out there is the very last phrase. The King James says, for the time is at hand. And that you said something very similar. Time is near. Is that not identical to phrasing that's in all over the New Testament about the kingdom? And it's about ready to happen. Brought that up last week. It would happen within 3.5 years when Jesus started saying this stuff about the kingdom being at hand. He was ascended into heaven, and there you go. Yeah. So I would argue then that when John uses identical wording to Jesus about the urgency of this, that whenever this was written, whatever was written in it, took place within a few years of then. until you get until there's a time shift, and there is one in chapter 20. But until then, until there's a time shift, all of it is urgent. So then I look and I say, okay, Domitian was bad. He was a tyrant. That's one of my options. But what happened within 3 or 4 years of that? Nothing. There's nothing in history that records anything happening. Nero, with the same types of descriptions, if it was written in the early window, 64 to 68, was there something catastrophic that would deserve apocalyptic type of writing that happened within 3-4 years of that? Yes. It was the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. So as I read the first little grouping of scripture, I would say that heavily points towards an early date, because there was nothing very shortly after 96 AD that happened that would have constituted this kind of apocalyptic writing. All right. Moving on down, Revelation chapter 1, verse 9 has a few key phrases there I want to hit on.
Just 9?
Just 9.
I, John, both your brother and companion in the tribulation and kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was on the island that is called Patmos. All
right, so we gain 3 items of knowledge here. Not a date, but just items of knowledge. One is that he says, I'm writing you in tribulation. Most people try to link Revelation and the Olivet Discourse. I agree. Okay, I agree. I think they're talking about the same thing. And so Jesus says, in those days there will be great tribulation. As I'm writing this in tribulation. Now, he could be meaning with this phrase, he could be meaning the fact that he's exiled to Patmos. He could say, well, this is my tribulation. But I would also argue that as we're going to cover in a second, there's a record of Nero trying to, whoever the Caesar was trying to boil him in water whenever Jesus kept him from, kind of like the 3 young boys in the fire, same type of situation. When he come out of it unscathed, they said, well, we're just going to exile you, right? At the same time he was killing. I mean, to me, that is what Jesus was talking about. We said there will be a great tribulation in those times. So I would argue that it's both. John himself is under that tribulation, but it's also the widespread thing that was happening. So I connect those two. The tribulation, he's talking about being in the kingdom, which isn't necessarily a timing thing. He's just saying, it'd be after Jesus ascended into heaven, right? So we're putting a floor on it. It has to be after Jesus ascended. So that he was on the island of Patmos. And then this is the most key part here in verse 9. This is where John himself declares that he received this vision, where he received it. Now we got something to chase after on a date. Is where John says, I received the vision on the island of Patmos. Now we got to scurry through the book of Revelation to see if there's any more clues. And also when we go to external sources, we're going to see if there's any mention of the island of Patmos in the external sources. That's very helpful in our detective work, them naming the place that it was given. Because sometimes we can track people's movements, where they were at certain times. That's how we date a lot of Paul's writings, is this is where he was at whenever he wrote this or whatever. All right. So that gets us to 11:1 through 3. 11:1 through 3 describes a standing second temple and the outer courtyard, and it's even going to reference who was allowed where. And if you read in the New Testament, the Old Testament, it's pretty clear that the Gentiles were allowed in the outer courtyard, but they weren't allowed in the inner parts of the temple, and it references that. So it's referencing a standing temple. So go ahead here. Somebody got 11:1 through 3.
And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple be bound, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles in the holy city. Shall they tread underfoot 40 and 2 months. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
All right. Mentions a couple things. Mentions the temple still standing. Also mentions this whole idea of this 42 months. Kind of put that in the back of your head. It'll come up later. So if the if the temple, the reasoning on the early date, now the late date folks don't really care about this whatsoever, but anybody who believes this was written in early date will point out that why in the world would John be writing about a standing temple if it had already been destroyed? Like, to me, that doesn't make sense. It seems like he's writing about a standing temple that's still standing. So therefore, it would have to knock the date prior to 70 AD of when he received the vision. And all right, and then so that's that. That's all that's there. Next piece of internal evidence is Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, giving the identity of this beast figure with a number. Revelation 13:18.
Here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600, 66.
Right. So 666. 600, three score, 60, and 6. 666. Okay. If you take Hebrew numbers, because back then in that part of the world, in that time, they didn't have they did not have the Aramaic numbering system that we have today. They use letters for numbers. We're familiar with this, Roman numerals. You know, this is part 2. So if I was going to do it Roman numeral, that I, capital I, right? If I say 9, it's IX, V, or 5 is V. V1. Okay. So he says this number is the person's name. So therefore, if you write it out the way it writes it out, like 603 score and 6, or what, if you write it out the long way, it literally spells Nero Caesar. Literally. That is Neron, I mean, in Greek they pronounce it Neron. Neron Kaisar. K-A-I-S. That's a transliteration of letters, but that's literally what it spells. In fact, there was some very, very early manuscripts. Manuscripts are copies of the book of Revelation that were out, that were circulating in non-Hebrew parts of the world in that Mediterranean area that actually had a different number there. They put the number 616, but they didn't put it in Hebrew. They put it in Latin. So instead they put Latin lettering there for the number. Guess what? 616 in Latin still spells Nero Caesar, or how you pronounce that? K-A-I-S-E-R, Caesar. That's how it was said, and that's how Caesar was pronounced or said in Greek. So that's the only textual variant. Variance just means a difference between manuscripts. It's the only one we have on that verse that's significant, and the significant change is the number, but the number is now written in Latin letters, or not, and it still spells Neron Caesar, Nero Caesar. So therefore, that would suggest that Paul was, or that he was given this vision during the time of Nero. Next one is Revelation 17. There's several verses here. It's talking about the 7 mountains or 7 hills, and it's also talking about the one upon them, and it's talking about the kings it's talking about the kings. Okay, and when I had it flipped over on the board, every camp, idealist, most futurist, and the preterist, past people, all pretty much agree on this. It was well known in the early times about what these 7 mountains or 7 hills represented. There was a nickname for Rome. It was called the City on the 7 Hills. Okay, so let's read now. I believe this is where Paul definitively dates his vision, the vision that he received.
John.
Oh God, yeah, John. Sorry, John. I don't know why I keep saying Paul. Yeah, my brain's messed up. John, where John definitively dates the vision that he received. And let's read these verses. Again, I don't want to do a study on 17. I just want to hit the verses where it calls this out directly. So 17, 1, 6, 7, then 9 and 10.
One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters."
Stop there real quick. So who in the Bible, or where in the Bible, what city in the Bible is always referred to as the harlot, the prostitute, the whore, depending on what translation you have, is what it says. There's one city. Well, Jerusalem.
Oh, Jerusalem?
Harlot, Jerusalem, that oh yeah, in the Old Testament, anytime they get into trouble, they were unfaithful to God. They would go worship idols and all this stuff, and God called Jerusalem the harlot. Yeah. The prophets would. Yeah. And that's where the punishment's going to be poured out upon. That's what verse 1 declares. All right, so let's get down to 6 and 7.
I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns."
Yep. 7 heads. They're going to refer that to the 7 hills too here in a second, or 7 mountains here in a second. And also the beast that she rides. It's based, remember in Paul, Paul wrote in Romans about how there's really no difference. Look at all these horrible things the Gentiles do that you're appalled at, but you do the same things. You had the oracles of God. Basically saying this woman, the harlot, is riding on top of the beast, right? Because they're one and the same. And okay, so this is, again, I don't want to do a Bible study on that. We'll get into that when we get to 17. But so now let's go to 9 and 10. Or I'm just wanting to focus on the dating stuff as we go through this part. And so 9 and 10.
This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills
Yep.
on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while.
All right. Rome is always in antiquity, like in the ancient times, referred to as the city on the 7 hills. That was just the name for it. If you go to Rome and you'll see, you'll look around, there's the 7 hills all around the city on the 7 hills. And then it says they're kings. And he says, this is when it is. He says, there's 6, and the 6th is now, something to that effect. The 6th is now, and there's still yet one to come. And then it'll be a little while after that, a little while after that. So let's name them. I give you the sheet. Here, let me get a sheet so I can make sure I spell them right. All right. So there was Julius Caesar. Julius. I'm writing them because we're going to be counting them in about 3 or 4 different ways to count them here. Augustus. 3. Yeah, Tiberius. 4 is Nero. Wait a minute, that can't be right. No, 4's not Nero. 4 is Caligula. Yeah, it's Caligula. Willard's right. Caligula. Then 5 is Claudius. Claudius is kind of a famous one. Claudius. Then there's Nero. Yeah, don't really care about these next two. Yeah, 7's Galba. Yeah, Galba. Or Galbo, whatever. Galba. Yeah, Galba. 8 is Otho. 9 is Vitellius. And 10, I'm going to stop at 10 because this is the only place, is Vespasian. Not Vespasian. I can't pronounce it. Vestilius or whatever. Okay. All right. So John states that they're on the 6th, like right now is the 6th. And then there's still yet one to come, and then there'll be just a little while. So here's the different ways. You can count this about 4 different ways. You can start with Julius Caesar, which is where I would start. You got Julius, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero. Bam. There we go. Still one to come. Now here's where you get into a mess. This right here is called the year of the four emperors. There were literally four emperors in 1 year, because when Nero, so Galboa led an insurrection against Nero, and when Nero saw he was going to be defeated, he committed suicide. Okay? Then somebody plotted like a scheme and a plot against Galboa, and him and his lieutenant underneath, or his loyal person, anything, was murdered on like the Senate floor or something in the Rome. Then this dude took over and was there for a very short time, and I think he got ousted or killed. And then this guy, same thing, and then bam. Now this was the next real, like the one that actually ruled for any more than a couple months.
We got two Vitelliuses.
Oh, not Vitellius. Who's 10? I thought it was Vespasian. That's who I thought it was, but then I read wrong.
Vespasian.
Vespasian. Yeah, Vespasian. Okay. So then the next real one that actually led for more than a few months or a couple months was Vespasian. Okay, so if I were counting, I would probably go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the next actual legitimate one was Vespasian, which, guess what? He oversaw the destruction of Jerusalem. In fact, they went down in 68 AD, and he was the leader of the army. And then they got recalled because of all this turmoil going on in Rome. And then once he became emperor, he sent his son down to finish the job in 70 AD. So here's the other ways to count it. Some people might say, Mike, listen, you're not doing this right, because Julius Caesar was never actually a Caesar. He was like a dictator, but it was still the Roman Republic. It hadn't changed into the empire yet. And the empire had Caesars. So then you would start here. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say you skip these still and you go 6. All right, when did his reign stop? 79. Who was the next one? That was sort of the T. Titus. When did his reign stop?
81.
There you go. That would put the ceiling at 81 whenever this massive catastrophe is supposed to happen, right? Because you were at 6. You wait a little while. So the latest date you could possibly get is 81 counting the kings. Nothing was going on at 81. Domitian wasn't the ruler. Nero wasn't the ruler, and there was nothing catastrophic that happened. So I would say that way of counting's out.
Yeah, I have his down wrong then. Whatever it is.
Well, Domitian was 2 more below him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have 81 to 96.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was Domitian. That's right. But
You don't have it here, is that?
Yeah, he does. Number 12.
Okay.
so if you wanted to count the kings and go and get the latest date possible, if we skip him, start here, skip these 3 guys that were just in there for a couple months, and then we get here, the latest you could possibly go was, what's the guy's name again? And his reign ended in 81. So counting the kings in the most generous way you could count them, trying to get the latest date possible, you can't get any later than 81.
Are you saying that's the latest that John could have been alive? Or?
No, I'm saying John tells us right here. Go ahead and read it, CJ.
Where are we?
17. 17.
9 and 10.
Yeah.
This calls for a mind. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is.
Yep.
The other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while.
5 kings have fallen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have fallen. 1 is. So is means that's when he's seeing the vision, when this is. 1 is Nero. These guys probably don't count. And even if you did count him, you'd end up still before 70 AD. So they probably don't. You're ending up here. Vespasian is the one that destroyed Jerusalem. And history records that he is. Paul, what I'm saying is John is dating himself right here. He's dating the vision that was given to him by the angel right here. He's saying 5 kings have fallen, boom, 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 boom. And I'm saying, even if you count this and skip Julius Caesar and skip these 3 guys, it didn't really matter. You still can only get to 81. And there's nothing that was going on in 81. Because that's out of our window. like the only time this could have possibly happened was either under Nero or Domitian. We can't get to Domitian. There's no possible way, based on what John just told us about when he's receiving the vision, that we could possibly get to Domitian by counting the kings. So the only other option is the way the earlier counting, the one I started with, was starting with Julius Caesar, and then it fits right into line. All right, next. Yeah, go ahead and read 20. Oh, sorry. Revelation chapter 20, verse 4.
I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge, and I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or its image and had not received its mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years.
Perfect. So that's the time shift. So I'm just hitting every time clue in the book. So the next time clue is where there's a big time shift. So everything after that, we can throw away this idea that it has to be soon, because he just told us that now this is happening and now there's this big time shift. So that's everything internal I got, except for one argument from silence. I'll never base any position on an argument for silence, but I will definitely use it to add to a big case that's already there. And the argument is, if this book, or if not this book, if John received the vision in 90-something AD, 95, 96, whatever, why in the world were they still talking about a temple that was still standing, a second temple that was still standing, the customs that were being observed in it in chapter 11? And then why throughout the entire book of Revelation, the entire vision that was given, why did it never mention the destruction of the temple? I don't understand. I just don't get it. Now, that's not, I never close my case and say that's the end-all be-all argument. I'm saying after we just went through all that, that's just the icing on the cake, I think, is like it was never mentioned, ever. So that's the internal stuff.